I died the same day they chose me. The Emperor's angels fell on our colony like a whirlwind of gold and ceramite, their armor gleaming beneath harsh industrial lights. They did not mention glory or honor. They just spoke about duty. We were not asked if we wanted to serve. We were not asked if we wanted to serve. In the Imperium, service is not an option. It is the only thing worth living for. I was taken with 30 other youths from the violent gang battles of Hive Cities. I recall the last time I saw my home. The rusting metal spires reached for a sky we'd never seen. The bitter smoke that has filled our lungs since infancy. The steady drone of machines put us to sleep at night. They weren't beautiful, but they were mine. All that I knew, all that I'd never see again. The transport ship hummed around us as we sat silently. Nobody dared to speak. The Space Marine's presence deterred even the most daring hive-gangers. His armor was a rich crimson, emblazoned with war and devotion emblems. His helmet, a skull-faced countenance, conveyed no emotion or vulnerability. The physical domination of the Angels of Death, hitherto only known through whispered whispers and propaganda images, surprised us. The transport ship hummed around us as we sat silently. Nobody dared to speak. The Space Marine's presence deterred even the most daring hive-gangers. His armor was a rich crimson, emblazoned with war and devotion emblems. His helmet, a skull-faced countenance, conveyed no emotion or vulnerability. The physical domination of the Angels of Death, hitherto only known through whispered whispers and propaganda images, surprised us. I glanced at the boys around me. Some were little more than children, thin frames, hollow cheeks, and eyes already carrying the weight of years they hadn't lived. Others were hardened, scarred by underhive wars like myself, their bodies toughened and their minds dulled to mercy. What bound us together was fear, though none would ever voice it. The voyage lasted 7 days, though time meant nothing inside the steel guts of the transport. We were fed once daily, a gray nutrient paste without taste, yet more filling than anything the hive had ever provided. Twice a day we were permitted to relieve ourselves, always under the lifeless stare of servitors. At night we huddled together on bare metal. No blankets, the ship's chill gnawing at us. The Space Marine who watched over us never moved, never ate, never slept. He remained at his post like a statue wrought from war itself. On the 7th day the ship trembled. We had arrived. The ramp hissed open and light speared into the hold, blinding after the gloom. We were driven out like cattle, dazed and stumbling. The sight that greeted us was alien, mountains that clawed into the clouds, forests stretching endlessly across the valleys, air so clean it seared lungs accustomed only to poison. Towering, above all of it, carved into the largest peak, was a fortress monastery, humanity's triumph over nature in stone. "Welcome to your grave," the Space Marine said, finally removing his helmet. The face beneath was scarcely human, pale as a corpse, latticed with scars, a mouth locked in permanent disdain. His eyes burned through flesh to the soul beneath. Yet within that inhuman stare, I caught the faintest echo. Memory, maybe. Perhaps he too had once stood here, a frightened boy wondering if he would ever see home again. "I am Brother Sergeant Kraus," he declared. "From this moment your past is gone, your names are stripped away, your families forgotten. You exist only to serve this chapter, and through it, the God Emperor of mankind." Another figure appeared, dressed not in ceramite but in white robes. His bald head gleamed, his face a patchwork of scars and augmetic grafts. One eye had been replaced with a glowing red lens that whirred softly as it locked onto us. "I am Apothecary Vaughn," he announced. "You will now be examined. Those who pass begin the transformation. Those who fail will serve the Emperor in other ways." The message was plain enough: succeed or die. The Imperium wasted nothing, least of all human flesh. The unworthy would be remade as servitors, minds erased, bodies bound to crude machines, tools of eternal obedience. We were herded through vast adamantium gates into the monastery's depths. The corridors were wide enough for dreadnoughts to walk abreast, the ceilings high and carved with skulls and sacred sigils. Servitors shambled past, eyes dull and unfocused. Human serfs scurried about with heads bowed, never daring to look up. The examination hall was cold and merciless, white tiles stained with ancient blood, walls lined with surgical instruments, some familiar, others incomprehensible and terrifying. Rows of restraint tables awaited. "Strip," Vaughn ordered. There was hesitation, but none dared refuse. We shed our filthy rags, the last remnants of who we had been, and stood shivering in the sterile air. What followed was degradation masked as science. Every part of us was probed, measured, catalogued, blood drawn, reflexes tested, flesh scraped. Vaughn and his aides spoke of us not as people but as specimens. Subject 17, bone density favorable. Subject 23, respiratory damage from hive smog, mark for lung replacement. Subject 8, malnourished, skeletal development stunted. Rejected. Numbers, not names. Materials, not men. 3 boys were taken away during the process, their faces showing both relief and shame. They thought they would live. I never saw them again. When it was done, we were handed plain gray robes and marched to a bare dormitory. Rows of narrow cots, no decoration, no personal effects allowed. At the entrance stood a servitor, half machine, half man. "Sleep," it droned. "Tomorrow you begin to die." I lay on my cot, unsettled by the softness after years of metal and stone. Around me, boys shifted uneasily, some crying silently, others staring blankly at the ceiling. No words were spoken. What could be said? We had been chosen, but for what? To become inhuman warriors serving a god none of us had ever seen? Or to perish in the attempt? I thought of my gang, the Blood Scorpions. We had killed for scraps of ground no sane soul would value, fought for resources too meager to matter. But there had been a kind of brotherhood there, born of pain and survival. Here there was none. Only competition. Only death. I told myself I would endure. I had lived 18 years in the Underhive, where most children never saw 10. I had killed at 12, risen to lieutenant through cunning and violence. If anyone could survive this transformation, it would be me. I was wrong. Tororel would not survive. He could not. For a space marine is not simply a man elevated. He is something entirely other, more and yet less than human. The next morning came too soon. A klaxon wrenched us from sleep. We were given 5 minutes to use communal facilities devoid of privacy, then marched into a vast dining hall. Above us, space marines ate mechanically, devouring vast portions. We aspirants were directed to lower tables where bowls of tasteless nutrient porridge awaited. "Eat quickly," a serf commanded. 10 minutes. The hall was adorned with trophies of conquest, alien bones, shattered weapons, preserved monstrosities. Over all hung a massive golden aquila, wings spanning the ceiling. Before we finished, Brother Sergeant Kraus entered. Silence fell. "Today we begin to remake you," he said. "Your bodies are frail, your minds untested. Many will not survive the conditioning. That is by design. Only the worthy shall receive the Emperor's gifts." We were marched to the training grounds, a vast courtyard ringed by towering walls. The morning air was sharp and cold, mountains looming in every direction. "Run," Kraus commanded, pointing to a winding trail up the mountainside. "Fail today, and you do not eat. Fail tomorrow, and you will not eat again. Fail a 3rd time, and you are removed." The trail vanished into the tree line, endless and cruel. None of us had ever run so far. The incline and thin air broke us quickly. Some surged ahead, others collapsed behind. I ran in the middle, lungs burning, body straining, every step survival. Servitor skulls hovered overhead, watching, recording. Time became meaningless. Sweat soaked my robe, blood filled my boots. But I kept running. This was no different than the Underhive. Survival had always been endurance. By the time I staggered back, the sun stood overhead. Out of 27 aspirants, only 18 made it by midday. That night one did not return at all. No questions were asked. He had failed, and failure had only one meaning here. The days that followed grew worse. Weighted packs, crude armor, endless drills. Each day, more fell away. By the week's end, 15 of us remained, stronger, harder, but already changed. Our bodies adapting, our humanity slipping. This was only the beginning. The black carapace lay beneath our skin, linking us directly to the armor's systems. "You'll deploy alone," he said, testing the seal at my gorget with practiced precision. "Each of you has an extraction point 50 kilometers from your drop site. You have 3 days to reach it. The native life is universally hostile. Geological scans suggest valuable mineral seams we may wish to claim." He listed our kit with clinical finality: a combat knife, a bolt pistol with 3 magazines, and a data slate with only the barest navigational data. Then his transhuman gaze fixed on me. "This isn't just survival, it's a resource survey. The chapter expects actionable findings. Fail to deliver them, and the mission is a failure, regardless of whether you make extraction." A tech marine approached bearing our weapons. "The Emperor's eyes are upon you," he intoned, placing the weighty bolt pistol in my hand, heavy even for my augmented strength. "Remember, a space marine serves even in death." We were led to our drop pods, iron coffins designed to punch through atmospheres and slam payloads onto hostile worlds with brutal efficiency. Inside was nothing but a restraint harness and minimal life support. When the hatch sealed with a hiss and the pod isolated me from my brothers, a stark solitude took hold. In the Underhive, humanity always pressed close. In the fortress, the chapter's presence was constant. Here, I was truly alone. The descent was violence made manifest. Even with inertial dampeners and my reinforced biology, launch and entry battered me against the harness hard enough to bruise ceramite-hardened bone. Heat built to the edge of tolerance as plasma flared around the pod's skin. Impact arrived like a hammer blow. Retros couldn't fully check the fall. Emergency systems flooded the compartment with shock-absorbing gel, suspending me in oxygenated slurry my altered lungs could draw breath from. Explosive bolts fired. The pod's front plate blew clear. The gel sluiced away, and I stepped onto alien soil for the first time. A primordial world greeted me. Colossal trees roofed out the blue-white sun, damp air thick with rot and growth, a living chorus of unfamiliar calls and clicks. I ran the standard checks: bolt pistol holstered, blade secure, data slate alive and pointing toward extraction. The slate put me 48 kilometers out, 16 kilometers per day across hostile ground, trivial for no one, but expected of a neophyte on a death world. The chapter demanded excellence. Anything less was failure, and failure meant death. I set off at the long, economical lope our modified musculature and enhanced heart-lung systems allow. Even burdened by armor and gear, I could hold the pace for hours. The first attack came 3 hours in, a many-limbed, many-eyed predator, a reptilian wolf analog, burst from the brush. It was quick. I was quicker. My knife opened its throat before those nested jaws could close on my greave. Hissing black ichor spattered my plates. I harvested blood and tissue, per orders. The data slate's crude cogitator flagged potentially useful biochemical compounds. The chapter would have its data. So the day went: movement, observation, intermittent violence. By nightfall, I'd covered nearly 20 kilometers and packed the slate with biological and geological notes. I found a defensible hollow between the roots of a giant tree and entered half-sleep, the catalepsian node letting one hemisphere rest while the other kept watch. Dawn brought fresh trials. Forest became swamp, fetid, bubbling, laced with toxic gas. My autosenses chimed warnings, but the multi-lung and altered blood chemistry filtered the threat. Progress slowed. Each step fought sucking mire that tried to steal my boots. There I met my first true test, a vast, amorphous thing heaved from the peat, tentacled, caustic, regenerating. I fired. Mass reactive rounds detonated inside its translucent bulk, only for the wounds to seal almost as fast. For the first time since my remaking began, I felt real fear, not the constant pressure of possible failure, but the primal certainty of being outmatched. Hypno-indoctrination rerouted the panic. Fear sharpened into analysis. Ammunition was limited. The creature's resilience made a kill unlikely. Retreat would bleed time I could not spare. Observation suggested it was territorial and sluggish out of water. The answer was cold and simple. Evade, don't engage. I used the bolt pistol for distraction shots, drawing it one way while I slipped around the perimeter another. It cost an hour, saved ammo, and kept me uninjured. By the end of the second night, I had forced another 18 kilometers, despite the bog. The swamp yielded to rocky highlands, the air thinning but cleaner, and I pressed on toward extraction. My enhanced night vision carried me forward long after the sun had set, guiding me across treacherous scree slopes and through narrow ravines. Along the way, I crossed paths with 3 other aspirants. We spoke no words, each was locked into his own trial, but we exchanged curt nods, silent acknowledgments of brotherhood and shared purpose. Though bound by transformation, each of us still had to prove himself alone. On the third day, I reached sight of the extraction plateau, a clearing stripped of vegetation, crowned by a beacon visible only to the auto-senses of an Astartes. I had covered the distance ahead of schedule and catalogued a wealth of planetary data. By every measure, the mission was complete, yet the beacon was not unguarded. The area around it swarmed with predators, drawn by its hidden electromagnetic signature. To reach it meant carving a path through the world's fiercest creatures, a final trial by combat. I checked my loadout. 2 magazines for the bolt pistol, 12 shots in all. My combat knife was dulled from prior battles, but usable. My armor bore scratches and cracks, one gauntlet compromised by caustic spray, my left pauldron torn away. I was exhausted, having allowed myself only the bare minimum rest. But there was no choice. The fight lasted 27 minutes by my chronometer. I emptied every round, finishing the last of them with steel alone. 3 kills fell to the combat knife, each strike born of desperation and training. By the end, I was battered, bloodied in both my own and alien fluids, yet still standing when I reached the beacon. Brother Sergeant Crastus waited there, impassive, his bolter held loosely at his side. He gave no hint whether he had watched my approach. "You are late," he said. I checked my display. 13 minutes past the extraction window, lost to the unexpected resistance. I offered no excuse, only the data slate. "Mission data." He interfaced it with his armor, standing silent as his autosenses processed the findings. At last he spoke. "Acceptable. Your assessment of the northern mineral deposits is incomplete, but sufficient." He turned, striding toward the waiting gunship, and I fell into step beside him, fatigue gnawing but unacknowledged. "How many survived?" The words slipped free before I could stop them, some vestige of human curiosity. 3, Crastus replied without turning, "including you. The rest failed to reach extraction, or failed to gather the data. 3 survivors from 5 who began the trial. 3 from 30 taken from the Hive, a 90% attrition rate, and we were still not full Space Marines. The cost of creating an Astartes was paid not only in resources, but in human lives extinguished, so a few might ascend. The return to the chapter homeworld passed in a blur of treatments and debriefings. My wounds were tended with mechanical efficiency, my armor stripped, repaired, or cannibalized for parts. The data I had gathered was extracted and analyzed by tech marines and apothecaries. Then came the ceremony. We 3 survivors stood before the assembled chapter in the great hall, kneeling on cold stone beneath vaulted ceilings. The chapter master himself presided, a presence so immense that even veterans seemed smaller beside him. His armor was a relic of artifice, etched with centuries of victories. His face, when revealed, bore the ruin and nobility of unending war. "You kneel as aspirants," he intoned, voice resonant across the chamber. "You rise as scouts of the chapter. Your transformation is incomplete, but you have proven worthy of the next stage of service to the Emperor." One by one, he touched us with the pommel of his ceremonial power sword, a gesture as old as Terra's knightly orders. "Your mortal names are gone. You are reborn as servants of the chapter and the Imperium. You will be known by designation alone, and the honor you bring to it." When his blade rested upon me, the words followed. "Rise, brother Jarrell." No longer Tiber Jarrell of Hive Secundus, no longer Blood Scorpion Lieutenant. Just Jarrell. Not a man, but a weapon. We were assigned to the 10th Company, the Scouts, the Crucible for neophytes. Sergeant Tauron became our master, a veteran of 3 centuries who had chosen training over promotion. His scarred face and single augmetic eye reflected both endurance and sacrifice. "Forget what you think you know of battle," he said on our first day. "You are not gangers, militia, or men. You are weapons of the Imperium. You will learn to kill with precision and certainty, nothing less." Where earlier training had broken us down, scout training began the rebuilding. We learned stealth and reconnaissance to move unseen despite our transhuman bulk. We drilled with the scout pattern bolter and absorbed doctrines honed over 10,000 years of war. Most of all, we learned to fight as a unit, our individuality reshaped into cohesion. Our first combat came 3 months in, Ork raiders striking mining colonies at the sector's edge. We deployed by drop pod alongside a strike force under Captain Varos. The pod slammed into a promethium refinery seized by the greenskins, its hatches blasting open. The full Battle Brothers surged forth, blue armor gleaming, bolters roaring in disciplined volleys. Orks fell in heaps, but more pressed forward, bellowing with savage joy. Sergeant Tauron led us scouts to high ground, positioning us atop storage tanks to deliver covering fire with our long-barreled weapons. The stench hit me first, fungal rot, sweat, and chemical fumes, a nauseating miasma even my enhanced lungs could barely filter. War had begun. Then came the sound. The Orks' animal roars as they stormed our position, crude shooters spitting wild, inaccurate fire that still killed when it struck. I took my assigned perch and brought my scout armor's enhanced optics online. Through the bolter's scope, I studied them in sharp detail, twisted faces lit with feral joy. I followed doctrine, priority to the heaviest guns and those bearing the rough marks of leadership. My first true kill was a knob, nearly twice the size of the others, clad in scavenged plates and swinging a powered cleaver capable of biting through ceramite. I tracked its rush toward our tactical flank, calculated the lead, and fired 3 in quick succession. 2 rounds punched into skull and detonated inside. The third was redundant. But as Sergeant Tauron taught us, certainty beats thrift. No chances left to rise. The fight lasted 3 hours and 27 minutes. The Orks did not break. We cleared the refinery room by room, corridor by corridor, bolter fire, flame, blades. When silence fell, 347 green corpses lay where they fell. 2 full battle brothers were down, their gene seed already reclaimed by the apothecary. One of my fellow scouts, Brother Kraus, lost an arm to a chopper, scheduled for augmetic replacement on return. Sergeant Taron judged my performance adequate. Ammunition use within tolerance, discipline maintained, orders executed without delay. In the Underhive, such a battle would have become legend. Here it was a footnote, a small victory in a war that began before my ancestors and will outlast me. The next 2 years blurred into training and deployments, always in support, learning by controlled exposure and constant refinement. With each mission we grew more proficient, more detached, more Astartes, less human. Final implants followed when our bodies were ready, progenoid glands to carry the legacy forward, and the black carapace to mate us to our warplate. The day I received my power armor was the day Tiber Joral truly ended, if any part of him still lingered. In the chapter Armory, artificers and tech marines performed the rites of armoring, anointing, and fitting each component. Hours passed, every connector married to the carapace, every seal tested and tested again. When they placed the helm in my hands, a strange distance opened within me. I stared into its empty lenses and saw a stranger, features too symmetrical, healed too perfectly, eyes no longer muddy brown but a hard amber from the oculary implant, skin pale from long absence of sun. I seated the helm. The seals sighed shut. Autosenses bloomed, tactical feed, environmental readouts, squad telemetry. The world sharpened and simplified, filtered through layers of targeting logic and priority. Brother Jorel, the master of the armory, said over Vox, "You now bear the full panoply of the Adeptus Astartes. Treat it as your flesh, for it is. Maintain it as you would your bolter. Revere it as you revere the chapter's banner. It embodies 10,000 years of war in the Emperor's name." I flexed gauntlets. The suit answered neural command through the carapace, immense strength delivered with fluid grace. I walked. It was like moving a man-shaped tank that nevertheless moved like my own body. "Your final trial awaits," the armory master concluded. "May the Emperor guide your bolter." That last trial proved both simpler and deeper than all before. We were led to the Hall of Truth, far below, with only senior officers and the chaplain in attendance. Statues of chapter heroes ringed the circular chamber. The floor bore inscriptions from the Codex Astartes and our battle litanies. At the center stood a pedestal with a single artifact, an ancient bolt pistol, metal worn smooth by uncounted hands. Chapter Master Varnax presided with Chaplain Mordath and Apothecary Vaughn, the same triad that had overseen our making. Captains and other seniors stood around them, armor heavy with honors. "Step forward, Brother Jorel," Varnax commanded. I advanced. My auto-senses, dampened with my helm, caught subtle energies in the walls and floor, older and more advanced than the chamber's austerity suggested. "Remove your helm," Mordath said. I broke the locks and lifted it free. Cold air, incense, the faint ozone of hidden machinery. "You stand remade," Varnax intoned. "Body reforged, mind disciplined, spirit tempered. One truth remains before you stand fully among us." Apothecary Vaughn read from a data slate. "Hive Secundus, Segmentum Pacificus. Blood Scorpion's lieutenant, ascendant through violence and cunning. 3 sectors under control, protection rackets, obscura distribution. Final act before recruitment, assassination of rival Vex, 6 bodyguards eliminated with toxins and improvised charges. Is this accurate?" "It is," I said, my voice too resonant to belong to the ganger described. Mordath stepped closer, skull helm set aside to reveal a face almost entirely rebuilt. Before you is a bolt pistol. It contains a single round. Behind you stands Brother Thaddeus, who completed his final trial 3 months prior. I had sensed no one. The helm's aids were absent. I did not turn. The transformation is not only flesh and reflex, Mordath continued. It is a rewriting of what you are. To complete it, the last thread to your past must be cut. Varnax's voice rolled like distant artillery. Take up the pistol, Brother Jor-El. Face Brother Thaddeus. One leaves this chamber a full battle brother. The other gives his final service. Understanding settled like iron. The hall was not ceremony. It was the terminal proof of obedience. Kill or die. 2 scouts who had passed everything else, now to demonstrate the absolute primacy of the chapter's will. I took the pistol and turned. Thaddeus stood 5 meters away, helmless, armored, unarmed. An unfamiliar face, likely from another intake, calm, accepting. Thoughts flashed. Refuse, miss on purpose, turn the weapon on myself. Echoes of a man who no longer existed. Tiber Joral might have balked, but Tiber was dead. Only Brother Jor-El remained, reconditioned, reforged to execute without question. I aligned the sights on Thaddeus's brow and squeezed. The report cracked through the chamber. The ancient mechanism cycled cleanly. He stood a heartbeat longer with a neat hole weeping red and gray, then crashed to stone. I lowered the weapon and faced the dais. Varnax dipped his head, the slightest acknowledgement. Flesh is frail, he intoned. Spirit endures. You have severed your tie to humanity, Brother Jor-El. You are Astartes. Vaughn was already at the body, reclaiming the progenoids. Nothing wasted. Even death serves. One detail may interest you, Mordath said, augmetic eyes glinting. Brother Thaddeus was born Vex, your former rival, the man you assassinated as a mortal. It should have struck me like a blow. Fate, symmetry, the Emperor's inscrutable design. I felt nothing. Those responses belonged to Tiber. He was gone. Only the weapon remained. Return to the armory, Varnax ordered. Complete your rites. You join 5th Company under Captain Helios. Wah! Grimskar has invaded the Thaxos system. We deploy at dawn. So I did. Armor properly consecrated now that I had proven worthy. Bolter, blade, and accoutrements issued. I took my place in Squad Torrentis, one component in the chapter's war machine. That evening, while I performed the rites of maintenance, Brother Sergeant Torrentis approached. The first deployment is the hardest, he said without preface. Not for the fighting, but because it's when you truly grasp what you've become. My purpose is clear, Brother Sergeant, I replied, hands never pausing over the bolter's firing assembly. No, he said softly, the weight of centuries behind the word. Your function is clear. Purpose comes later, if it comes at all. Function is what you do. Purpose is why. He sat beside me. When I was newly elevated, I questioned, not orders or doctrine, but meaning. We fight and die for an Imperium that scarcely knows us, to protect people who fear us, as much as they revere us. For what end? Heresy, if spoken by a lesser, yet unassailable from a veteran of 2 centuries. I found my answer on a compliance action, he continued. A hive not unlike yours. We were clearing a hab when I found a family, parents and 3 children, terrified of the rebels and of us. The father stood in front of them, no defiance, just animal terror and love. In that moment I understood, not with the mind but the marrow. His courage was born of love. That is what we protect. Not the Imperium as an abstraction, not the distant emperor. Humanity, flawed, irrational, worthy. He rose. You executed Brother Thaddeus today as required. You are a perfect weapon. Never forget, weapons are wielded. Purpose is found not in the strike, but in what that strike shields. He left me to my rituals, his words settling alongside indoctrination and battle logic in the scaffold of my thoughts. At dawn, we lifted for Thaxos III aboard the Vigilant Faith. 17 days through the warp to drill, train, and pray. In my cell before the Emperor's small shrine each Marine tends, I considered Torrentus's distinction. Purpose beyond function remained difficult for my remade mind, but the thought did not leave me. I had been made to obey, kill the Imperium's enemies, and serve until death. What purpose could exist beyond those limits? Yet a faint remnant of Tiber Jural reached for the idea. I remembered the Underhive and its endless struggle to survive. I remembered my gang, brotherhood hammered out of hardship and violence. I remembered my mother, her face blurred by hypno-indoctrination and time, dead from a preventable illness in a place where medicine was a luxury the underclass could never buy. These memories felt like artifacts behind armored glass, unrecoverable, yet holding something my new existence lacked, a quality that resisted the tidy logic of an Astartes mind. I finished my devotions and set those thoughts aside as irrelevant to function. There would be orcs to kill, ground to secure, orders to execute. Purpose could wait, perhaps forever. While preparing for the next training cycle in the practice cages, my enhanced hearing picked up 2 chapter serfs nearby, whispering as they readied equipment. Another batch of new ones, faces like stone, one said. Remember when we were taken from Hive Primus? We thought they'd be our saviors. They are what they must be, the other answered. The Emperor's finest. Without them, the Imperium would have fallen long ago. I know. I just wonder what they sacrificed. Not only their bodies, but what's inside. The human part. Careful, dangerous thoughts. Keep to your duties. The angels hear more than you think. They moved on, but their words stayed with me. What had I sacrificed? Everything that made Tiber Jural a person. My past, my ties, whole regions of feeling and experience. Yet, was that truly a loss if those same things would have led only to a meaningless death in the Underhive? Was it not better to serve as a weapon in the Emperor's arsenal, to die with purpose, even if not with understanding? The question circled like a predator, testing the fences of my indoctrination. I forced it away and focused on the drills ahead. There would be years, centuries, if I endured, to consider such matters. For now, there were orcs to kill and a sector to secure. As Vigilant Faith plunged into the warp behind the Geller field, I joined my squad for briefings. The clarity of combat would scour these needless reflections. I was Brother Jorel, tactical marine of the 5th Company, a weapon of the Imperium, forged from human stock but remade beyond human limits. If any ghost of Tiber still haunted the engine of war I had become, it would fade beneath the weight of campaigns and service. Not a tragedy, simply the price of becoming one of the Emperor's angels of death. The boy had died so the weapon could live. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, weapons are the only currency that matters.